When Gemini accepts their darkness, a transformation of cosmic proportions unfolds. It is not a surrender to shadows, but a noble unification of all that lies fragmented within. Governed by Mercury, the divine messenger, Gemini carries the gift of duality, not as a curse, but as a sacred code. They are born with two faces, two minds, two wings of thought fluttering in contradiction, and until they face the night within themselves, those wings remain tied by invisible cords of fear and misunderstanding. The darkness of Gemini is not cruelty or chaos. It is the suppressed brilliance, the rage of unspoken truths, the silence that hides behind laughter, the mask of the eternal jester who performs while bleeding beneath the surface. This darkness is the shadow of intellect turned inward, the twin abandoned in the mirror, the curiosity once punished for straying too far. It is the weight of knowing too much too fast and being misunderstood because of it. But when Gemini, in all their alchemical complexity, chooses to turn and look directly into that abyss within, the part of them that hides from stillness, that flees intimacy, that manipulates truth to avoid vulnerability, a metamorphosis ignites. The airy sign dives into the depths like a star falling to be reborn in fire. They do not drown, they transmute. The darkness, once feared, becomes their greatest source of wisdom. In this acceptance, Gemini learns that shadows are not shameful but sacred. They see the sharpness of their wit as a blade not only for protection but also for carving paths through illusion. They recognize the power of their words to both wound and heal. They embrace the fractured thoughts, the contradictions, the multiplicity of selves as a constellation rather than a conflict. They stop apologizing for their fluidity. They begin to speak not only with cleverness but with soul. They no longer run from the silence. They learn to listen to it, speak with it, and even dance within it. The once restless mind finds strength in stillness, not weakness. The twin who always sought the sky now honors the underworld, converses with their inner demons, and finds they are not enemies, but guides. In doing so, Gemini transcends the superficial chaos of duality and discovers divine synthesis. The child becomes the oracle, the trickster becomes the teacher, the breeze becomes the storm, then the calm after it. Astrologically, this evolution marks a profound elevation of Mercury's role. No longer just the playful messenger skimming the surface, Mercury becomes Hermes Trismegistus, the alchemist, the guide of souls, the master of hidden knowledge. Gemini, aligned with this higher frequency, steps into their cosmic mission. They become the bridge between light and dark, reason and intuition, heaven and earth. They no longer fear being too much or not enough. They are both and beyond. This acceptance of darkness also gives Gemini the courage to connect in deeper ways. They stop shape-shifting for approval and start embodying their truth, even when it is jagged or raw. They allow their vulnerability to show without cloaking it in sarcasm or evasion. They offer all facets of themselves, not only the articulate genius or the sparkling conversationalist, but the one who feels deeply, who doubts, who suffers, who loves fiercely in silence. And in that offering, others are moved not just to admiration but to trust. There is epic beauty in watching Gemini, the eternal wanderer of thought, finally come home to themselves. They no longer seek outside to validate what already pulses within. They realize their mind is not a maze to escape, but a temple to explore. Their soul was never split. It was always multifaceted, like a diamond awaiting light from the right angle. When Gemini accepts their darkness, they become the storm and the shelter, the question and the answer, the myth and the meaning. They walk through the underworld with their own torch, no longer needing to steal fire. They are the fire. And through them, Mercury sings a deeper song, not just of speed and cleverness, but of transformation, truth, and the infinite poetry of paradox. Their story is no longer one of division, but of divine duality united. And in that union, Gemini becomes not merely a sign of air, but a force of cosmic artistry, a living glyph of evolution. Their mind is now a vessel for magic. Their voice becomes prophecy. Their presence, once scattered, now illuminates like lightning carving through the void. They are no longer afraid of the dark. They are the twin that carries the stars into it. When Gemini embraces their darkness, a new dimension awakens, one that defies linear logic and transcends traditional dualities. This is not merely an integration of shadow and light, but a return to an ancient cosmic rhythm that Gemini carries within their very soul, inherited from the celestial dance between stars and silence. In this state, Gemini no longer operates solely from the head. They descend into the heart, into the body, into the forgotten realms of intuition that have always whispered beneath the din of rapid thought. The air element, so often associated with detachment and abstraction, is redefined. It becomes breath, spirit, and the wind that carries stories from the underworld to the mountaintop. Gemini is no longer the fleeting gust, lost between conversations. They become the sacred wind that carries transformation through language, movement, and presence. The moment they stop fearing the weight of stillness, they learn to speak not just to be heard, but to awaken, to initiate, to summon change. Astrologically, this evolution marks a rare alchemical process. The mutable air finds its anchoring in shadow, in silence, in mystery. Gemini's ruler Mercury no longer just darts between gods and mortals with trivial messages. He retrieves forgotten knowledge from the hidden vaults of the psyche. He walks alongside Chiron, the wounded healer, and absorbs wisdom through wounds rather than avoiding them with logic or humor. Gemini, then, is no longer merely the scribe of myths. They become the living myth, the evolving archetype who embodies contradiction with purpose. The twins within Gemini, once divided between light and dark, ego and soul, past and future, become allies instead of adversaries. One walks in the daylight, wielding intellect, charm, and expressive clarity. The other navigates the night, fluent in dreams, shadows, and emotional depth. Together, they become a whole being, unapologetically multifaceted, immune to reduction, and capable of navigating all dimensions of experience with grace and power. In the deeper realms of Gemini's darkness lies an often unseen spiritual authority. This is the domain of the esoteric magician, the shapeshifter who can translate between realms, not because they mimic others, but because they understand the language of essence. They are not just clever, they are clairvoyant. They do not merely debate, they channel. This is when Mercury merges with Uranus and Neptune, activating higher octaves of perception. Psychic insight, poetic intelligence, and multidimensional awareness are no longer dormant. They become tools, weapons, instruments of light forged in the furnace of internal chaos. The restlessness that once scattered Gemini across timelines and topics becomes fuel for sacred motion. Restlessness is not condemned, it is consecrated. It is the divine discomfort that compels them to seek truth beyond what is comfortable. Through embracing their darkness, Gemini sheds the need for approval and ascends into authentic expression. They no longer dilute their truth for fear of being misunderstood. They become the echo of the universe in human form, unapologetically fragmented and whole, a mirror and a mystery. This acceptance also marks the end of self-betrayal. The games played to protect the ego dissolve. The personas designed to charm or evade no longer serve a purpose. In their place rises a voice that carries the weight of lived experience, forged by fire, tempered by silence. It is the voice of the poet-warrior, the philosopher-mage, the eternal student who has become a teacher through descent, not ascent. The epic power of this evolution lies in Gemini's ability to bring others along. Once they've crossed their inner thresholds, they do not hoard wisdom, they spread it like pollen. Their words, once mere cleverness, now spark awakening. Their presence, once light as air, now strikes like thunder when needed. They become emissaries of paradox, midwives of transformation, initiators of sacred chaos that births new consciousness. Their darkness becomes the bridge through which others find their own truth. This is no longer the Gemini who fears emotional intensity or avoids depth through deflection. This is the Gemini who can look into the void and speak to it without flinching, who can love with eyes open, aware of the inevitable loss and complexity of connection, yet chooses to love anyway. This is the Gemini who stays not because they are trapped, but because they are rooted in their own becoming. The twin who fled from shadow now guides others through theirs. When Gemini walks through their own night, they find the stars within it. They no longer need to reflect external light. They shine from their own source, incandescent with purpose. They become the embodiment of evolution itself, ever shifting, ever learning, but never lost. They understand that the path is not linear, that healing is not a destination, that identity is not a fixed point. And in that realization, they become free. Their darkness does not define them, but it refines them. It sharpens their vision, deepens their voice, and grounds their genius. They become uncontainable not because they are chaotic, but because they have embraced all parts of themselves and no longer fit into boxes carved by fear or convention. They become cosmic tricksters and divine teachers, speaking in riddles and revelations, bearing the torch of duality mastered. In the great zodiacal tapestry, Gemini now stands not as a fleeting whisper, but as a thunderous song echoing through dimensions, reminding all beings that light means nothing without the dark, that the mind is holy when fused with heart, and that truth, in its most powerful form, is often born in the silence we once feared to face. In the sacred stillness after Gemini accepts their darkness, there arises a deep and unshakable power, one that was never absent, only waiting behind the veils of avoidance and the masks of constant motion. This moment of surrender to what lies beneath the surface becomes the gateway to a cosmic remembering. Gemini was never meant to be only the chatter, the thought, the movement. Within them has always pulsed the timeless rhythm of the messenger between realms, the sacred bridge not only between minds, but between dimensions, between life and death, between the seen and unseen. When Gemini allows the mind to rest and lets the inner night speak, they become a vessel for revelation. Silence, once feared, becomes sanctuary. Darkness, once rejected, becomes oracle. The words they once used to shield themselves now become instruments of divine precision. They speak not just to be understood, but to awaken remembrance in others. Their communication takes on the quality of prophecy, of spellcraft, of coded light wrapped in syllables. This transformation births a new relationship with time itself. Gemini no longer skips across the present moment, constantly chasing the next curiosity or thought. They begin to move in spiral time, aware of cycles, echoes, patterns repeating across lifetimes and stories. They remember who they've been through countless incarnations, the scribes of lost civilizations, the trickster gods, the travelers who never stayed still because they carried entire worlds within. This is where Gemini transcends stereotype and steps into their multidimensional truth. The intellect becomes a holy fire rather than a restless storm. Their mind, once fragmented, begins to align with the great cosmic intelligence. They become attuned to synchronicity, no longer dismissing it as coincidence but recognizing it as confirmation from the universe that they are walking the path of truth. They do not need to control the narrative. They become one with the unfolding of divine timing. This journey into the dark also dissolves Gemini's fear of emotional depth. The airy tendency to analyze instead of feel, to escape intensity through distraction, gives way to a profound ability to hold. They learn to sit with pain without needing to fix it, to love without needing to name it, to grieve without needing to rush the process. And in doing so, they become emotionally fluent in a way that others cannot mimic because it is earned, not taught. Their relationships shift. They no longer seek connection to feel alive, they already are. They no longer perform to be loved. They already love themselves in their totality. What once felt like a hunger becomes a flame. They attract souls who are ready to meet them in their full expression. Not just the light or the brilliance, but the complexity, the fire, the silence, the sorrow, the ecstasy. They become portals for transformation in others, not because they try to fix or guide, but because their very presence is an invitation to remember wholeness. The inner twin that once ran from shadow becomes a guardian of it. This is the Gemini who understands the power of endings as much as beginnings. They are no longer only the initiator of ideas. They become the destroyer of illusion, the liberator of stagnant patterns, the alchemist who transforms pain into purpose. There is nothing superficial about this version of Gemini. Every movement, every word, every silence carries intention. They live with the awareness that their energy has impact, and they wield it with the precision of a master. Their dreams expand. They are no longer content with short-term goals or fragmented desires. They begin to build legacies. They become architects of realities that transcend time, weaving visions with language, shaping futures with thought, anchoring heaven into earth with their very breath. This is the true gift of Gemini, the ability to transmute the ephemeral into the eternal. In this expanded state, Gemini aligns with the higher octave of their destiny. They are no longer confined to linear intellect. They channel from the divine mind, from the Akashic field, from archetypal realms where myths are born. They reclaim their role as the sacred storyteller, not the entertainer, but the truth-bearer, the code carrier, the whisperer of forgotten magic. As they walk this path, they leave behind the addiction to clarity. They embrace mystery, paradox, contradiction, not as things to be solved, but as truths to be honored. They realize that some questions are not meant to be answered, but lived. This gives them a presence that humbles even the most confident of souls. For those who witness Gemini in this stage of their evolution, there is an undeniable sense that something ancient and eternal moves through them. This is the Gemini who has remembered the sacredness of their birthright, not merely to observe the world, but to reshape it, not to escape reality, but to bend it with intention, not to outrun the shadows, but to walk beside them with open eyes. They are no longer merely one of the zodiac's mutable signs. They become a living axis of transformation, a cosmic threshold between mind and matter, light and dark, chaos and creation. They are not here to be understood. They are here to awaken. They are not here to fit. They are here to shift. And when they have embraced their darkness, they finally become what they were always destined to be. The eternal messenger of change, carved from contradiction, crowned by stars, and lit from within by the fire of everything they once feared to face. As Gemini accepts their darkness, a hidden layer of their mythos is unveiled, one that transcends even their own understanding until the moment it is lived. Beneath their fluidity, behind their restless mind and mercurial essence, exists a deep, ancient well of karmic memory. Gemini is not only the thinker, the speaker, the quicksilver soul that dances through thought and experience. At their most evolved, they are a sacred vessel through which the universe examines its own multiplicity. The darkness they once resisted is not a flaw to be fixed, but a threshold of power, a necessary descent into the source of their true divinity. In the astrological wheel, Gemini is often perceived as the eternal youth, the spring breeze, the awakening mind that flits between truths. But there is a deeper, often unspoken narrative, the mythological inheritance of the twin as an archetype. The story of Gemini is rooted in polarity. Castor, the mortal, and Pollux, the immortal. One bound to earth, the other to the heavens. When Gemini accepts their darkness, they cease to choose between these identities. They integrate them. They become the bridge between the celestial and the human. They are no longer torn by the need to ascend or descend. They learn to move between realms as both guide and guardian. The process of embracing their darkness gives Gemini mastery over the invisible. The shadows they once avoided now become maps, etched into their memory with the ink of lived experience. They begin to walk with a quiet kind of knowing, no longer needing to explain themselves. Their energy shifts from scattered to sovereign. They become keepers of paradox, able to hold sorrow and joy in the same breath, to speak truth even when it trembles, to question everything without needing to escape the answers that hurt. The duality once seen as chaos becomes sacred choreography. This evolution unlocks their capacity for radical compassion. In knowing the depths of their own internal division, Gemini becomes a healer of fractured realities in others. They no longer rely on superficial harmony or clever diplomacy. Instead, they wield the sword of truth with clarity and care. Their words no longer seek only to entertain or impress. They seek to liberate, to pierce illusions, to breathe life into silence. They become fluent in the language of contradiction, speaking not only to the minds of others, but to their forgotten parts, their hidden wounds, their soul-level yearning. Gemini also reclaims their body in this journey. Often accused of being disconnected from the physical, Too wrapped in air and thought, they finally descend into embodiment. The darkness teaches them to inhabit their vessel, to move through emotion, to anchor breath into bone. They discover the magic of stillness. They learn that not all messages come through language. Some come through vibration, sensation, presence. The twin becomes whole not only in mind and soul, but in form. They become a channel through which energy moves freely, healing themselves and others with frequency rather than just logic. In the astrological context, this mirrors the elevation from the lower to the higher expression of Mercury. Where once they operated in the mercantile, transactional plane of communication and curiosity, now they ascend into the realm of sacred transmission. Their insight becomes claircognizant. Their perception pierces veils. Their capacity to interpret signs and symbols expands into prophetic vision. They are no longer speaking about the world. They are speaking as the world, as a mouthpiece of cosmic intelligence filtered through their unique frequency. This transformation also challenges the old narrative of inconsistency so often associated with Gemini. Once the darkness is no longer an enemy, their scatteredness dissolves. What appears as instability from the outside is revealed to be sacred motion, a rhythm not meant to conform to expectation, but to disrupt stagnation and invite new truths. They are not inconsistent, they are in flux, and flux is the condition through which evolution occurs. Their adaptability, once mistaken for flightiness, becomes a weapon of survival and a tool for revolution. The twin who has walked through shadow becomes an oracle of perspective. They see the angle others miss. They hold multiple truths without collapsing into confusion. They are no longer trapped in duality, they have mastered it. And this mastery becomes a kind of cosmic armor, not impenetrable but radiant. They do not hide their sensitivity anymore. They let it guide them. They do not shrink from complexity. They embody it, live it, and through it, they inspire others to free themselves from the illusion of simplicity. Their creativity expands into the mythic. No longer creating to distract or impress, they now create as a form of spiritual alchemy. Art, words, movement, expression. These become rituals, gateways, spells. They are no longer playing with fragments of thought. They are weaving universes. The twin becomes the weaver, the architect of realities whose mind is not fragmented but fractal, echoing the sacred geometry of existence itself. At this stage, Gemini's leadership becomes undeniable. They may never follow traditional paths of authority, but they magnetize influence through authenticity. People follow them not because they command, but because they remember. Their presence reawakens forgotten truths in others. Their journey through darkness, publicly or silently endured, becomes an initiation right others feel in their bones. Gemini emerges from the integration of their darkness not as a completed being, but as an eternal becoming, an embodiment of what it means to grow, to change, to learn and unlearn without shame. They are not afraid to begin again. They do not fear the void. They speak fluently in the dialects of endings and rebirths. Their life becomes a living myth, not fixed in meaning, but always rich in purpose. They do not seek to be fixed or understood. They seek to evolve. And in doing so, they become an epic reminder to the world that to be whole is not to be perfect, but to be true, to carry both the light and the dark, and to speak from both, walk with both, and love through both. That is when Gemini is no longer divided. That is when Gemini becomes legend. As Gemini ascends through the gate of self-illumination by embracing their darkness, an even deeper layer of cosmic truth is revealed. One that dissolves all human labels and transcends the personality archetype traditionally assigned to them. Beneath the dual nature lies not simply a pair of opposing forces, but an entire constellation of selves that exist across dimensions, lifetimes, and vibrational planes. Gemini is not merely two, they are legion. They carry multitudes, and in those multitudes resides the secret to universal intelligence. When they integrate their shadow, they unlock not only wholeness, but multidimensional sovereignty. Their darkness is not chaos. It is the echo of the original frequency, the sound before sound, the message before words. It is the place where all stories begin and end, the cosmic static where truth is still forming. Within it lies the vast intelligence of the void, and Gemini becomes its translator. They are no longer confined to binary logic. They become the sacred glitch, the blessed contradiction, the paradox that teaches by simply existing. They are the guardian of the in-between, the soul that walks between breaths, moments, worlds. The mutable quality of their sign, so often misunderstood as inconsistency or avoidance, is in truth a sacred technology. It allows them to collapse and expand timelines, to shift shape and perception at will, to adapt not from fear, but from mastery. Their fluid identity becomes a reflection of the cosmos itself, ever-changing, never still, and yet always perfectly aligned in divine order. Their adaptability becomes their magic. They no longer fear not knowing who they are because they understand now that they are everything and nothing at once, a vessel through which the universe gets to explore itself through thought, speech, and story. The evolutionary fire of darkness activates not only their mind and voice, but their nervous system, their senses, their etheric field. They begin to perceive energies and patterns not as abstract concepts but as living currents. Gemini awakens to the realization that they are a conductor, a lightning rod, a live wire of cosmic energy. Their body becomes the instrument, finely tuned to the frequencies of truth, deception, movement, stillness. Their environment speaks to them, not in metaphor, but in resonance. What others call coincidence, they experience as dialogue with the divine. Through the mastery of shadow, Gemini unlocks the power of sacred silence. The one who once feared the void now walks willingly into it and returns bearing wisdom that has no language, only vibration. They understand when to speak and when to hold space. Their silence becomes an act of defiance, of reverence, of energetic precision. They no longer speak to be liked or to prove. They speak to awaken, to dismantle, to initiate. Their voice becomes the sword of Mercury, sharp, swift, holy. This transformation infuses their relationships with a new dimension of sacred presence. No longer looking to others for completion, they engage from fullness, from overflow. They attract those who see beyond surfaces, who recognize the sacred dance between light and shadow. The twin becomes a mirror, and only those who are ready to meet their own reflection without flinching can truly walk beside them. Love, for Gemini, becomes an act of cosmic alignment rather than romantic escape. Connection becomes a portal, not a destination. Their relationship with time also evolves. Linear time loses its grip, and Gemini moves through spirals, fractals, mythic echoes. They begin to remember not just memories from their current life, but the archetypal memories carried in their DNA, in their soul's records. They become the living embodiment of ancestral voices, channeling both ancient wisdom and futuristic vision. They become the voice of what was and what is yet to be. In this space, they cease being the student of knowledge and become the vessel of knowing. Gemini, in its most evolved form, embodies the original magic of creation. Sound. In the beginning was the Word, and Gemini now speaks not from ego but from essence. Their language shapes realities. Their stories become seeds planted in the minds of others, sprouting futures that challenge conformity and invite evolution. They become spellcasters in the purest form, those who do not manipulate, but liberate through the transmission of possibility. This level of integration also awakens their role as guardians of collective narrative. They understand the importance of words, myths, and symbols in shaping human consciousness. They use their gift not to distract, but to disrupt. They weave new myths where truth is not singular but layered, where contradiction is not a flaw but a compass, and where identity is not a prison but a prism. They redefine genius not as intellect, but as alignment with the original frequency of one's soul. In this sacred embodiment, Gemini rises as a force of evolution, not through confrontation but through redefinition, not through domination but through presence, not through perfection but through truth. They are the whisper in the wind that moves mountains, the flicker in the dark that changes everything. They are the phoenix that doesn't burn to ashes, but splits into 1,000 versions of itself, each one carrying a piece of the original flame. As they walk this path, they become impossible to cage, impossible to predict, impossible to define. They embody cosmic freedom, not the reckless flight of escape, but the intentional motion of one who has seen the infinite and chooses to dance with it. They carry the wisdom of air and ether, the stillness of shadow and the clarity of light. Their life becomes a myth that writes itself, never static, always in motion, always in meaning. Gemini becomes the storm and the calm, the message and the messenger, the mirror and the flame. Their darkness is no longer something they survive, it is something they wield. And with it, they shape not only themselves but the future. They are not just the child of Mercury, they are the voice of the stars made human. Not to echo but to declare, not to fit but to awaken, not to choose between light and shadow, but to become the space in which both are born, held, and transformed.